Welcome to the OpenHearted Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the OpenHearted Podcast. I'm your host, Will Wheeler, joined with my main man, Photon John. What's going on, brother?
Oh, just getting ready for Friday beers.
Friday beers, where are they happening?
Good afternoon. I'm going to go back up to that Tribe Clubhouse, that social community organization.
Oh, cool. Oh, so you're going back up to Redcliffe?
Just for tonight, yeah.
Yeah, cool. I see you got one of your band caps on, mate.
I do, yeah.
Oh, representing, hey? How do you get your hands on one of those?
You just go to gutterfire.com and order one.
Gutterfire.com right there. See, do you like how I added that in, mate?
That was nice, thank you.
You know what I mean? I'm all about giving, man. I'm all about giving, but I tell you what, we should talk all about giving. We should get our guest up on stage today. Let's get him up all the way from the United States. Got my main man, Carlos Frank Rodriguez. What's going on, brother?
Good. Thank you.
Man, what part of the United States do you come from?
I was born in San Diego, so West Coast, down in California, but I would grow up in Colorado. So right now I'm calling in from, right, almost, kind of in the middle of West. So Denver, Colorado is where I'm pulling out of.
Sorry, do you follow the football and all that? Like the college football?
What type of football?
Like, the American football, the NFL?
No, I don't at all.
Okay, that's okay. It's just reason why I sort of follow a little bit of the college football, and there's been a big hoo-ha about the new Colorado University coach. I think his name's Deion Sanders or something.
Well, that's different. I like Deion Sanders.
Okay, yeah. He seems like a mad dude, eh? He is like the rock star of coaches.
I grew up with him, yeah. So I guess if I have tuned into football lately, it's to catch his a very inspirational guy. He's come a long ways.
Yeah, he has. And it's interesting watching his kids grow up because he's coaching his kids and they're pretty awesome as well. And I didn't realize, because I've only just sort of learned a little bit about him, he was an NFL player and American Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that's right. I think he was a dual. He may have even been one of those triple threats. He drilled it out of college. So.
Wow, crazy. But I tell you what, man, we should get stuck into this. I tell you what, we've got and even before we sort of got the show started, all of that type of stuff, you're talking about some really awesome stuff. But what we'll do, I'll just introduce the show first. Whoops, I just pressed something that I shouldn't have. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is acquired neurodiversity from my time in the armed services. So awesome stuff there. But before we get into that, what we'll just quickly do a bit of a shout out to anyone listening today. So if you are listening, please feel free to follow, subscribe, and like all of our social media platforms. You can check us out on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which is now X. I'm still sort of tossing up if I should change it, just leave it like that. We've got Twitch, YouTube, also live on LinkedIn. And if you haven't already done so, please check out the OpenHearted Society website and please subscribe to our mailing list there. Photon John, you ready to rock and roll, my man?
I am ready.
Also, too, if there are any questions, please feel free to come through and we will use them to, I suppose, share within the show here. So, Carlos, my man, you've got such an awesome story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, mate.
Yeah, thank you for that. Hope I don't let you down.
Man, you won't let us down. I can assure you of that.
Yeah.
I was born second of six. I'm a veteran. I was in the military for a decade. stayed in that kind of community for another kind of 3 years, and then I would get out. I think, just touch on who I am from a family perspective. Second of six, followed my older brother into the service. Back then, there was a good deal for, that's what I was chasing. I thought I went in signed up for 4, and found out in year 5 I had signed up for 6. It was able to get my education out of it. In retrospect, it was a good time. I have nothing bad to say about my time in service, and if pressed, I would do it again. And fast forward to now, and me being up on this show, it's new perspectives. I think as I would come out of service, initially I did quite well, and I think as I look back, I had rode kind of smothered my we'll call them failures with accolades. And after service, I did 2-3 years of looking real good, and picked up some acronyms, and one of them would be ADHD. And that really, like we were covering, got me tuned on to you guys as I was trying to figure out what that means.
Yeah, cool. Hey, just out of curiosity, so you spoke about education, especially in the military and all that. Is that a common thing for a lot of people to go to the military so they can get educated in a certain field or stuff like that over in the United States?
Huge. I can remember, the recruiters coming around the high schools and whatnot, and really getting on your beeper back then, and wanting to talk to you, and it was a path. It was an opportunity. I think if you look back at that time, though, we had been at kind of a peacetime for, I think, relatively 30 years. And so people were, snatching that up, staying in the Guard or doing 4 years and really coming out ahead. And I would go in 2002 of November. So I was in kind of my basic training when the war with Iraq kicked off. So essentially most of my entire adult life was spent in a wartime posture.
Crazy. See, look, I suppose if we're comparing it to, say, Australia, where we're from, it's so different like that. It's not, it seems like it's a lot heavier, so that I think that what I'm sort of getting at is in the United States, there's probably a bigger push to get more people into the services than, say, here in Australia type of thing. So it's actually interesting to hear what it is like over there in regards to that.
Well, yes, we were fighting 2 simultaneous wars at one time, if you remember, Iraq and Afghanistan. And so there were some peak years where we really surged up, and, people had to answer the call.
Out of curiosity, and this is sort of going off topic a little bit, so when did you actually start? So did you say you started in the military in 2002?
Correct. So I would be, let's see, I'm 44 right now. So I after high school, I worked construction as a trades apprentice for 3 years, 3.5, 4 years, 4 years, and then went to follow my brother into service, my older brother.
So did September the 11th really change things for you guys? Was that sort of like, man, what the hell's going on here? Because like you're saying, before that, it was a very quiet type of thing.
No, I mean, I didn't join for 9/11. I don't think that, what was that? Like, some people, I mean, that's exactly why they dropped everything to answer that call. I think for me, it was inspired by my older brother. I mean, he joined the Navy, and then he would go on to, from corpsman to becoming a Navy doc. And so I think he was joined about 3 years ahead of me, and seeing him come around, and, he looked sharp.
Yeah, cool. Man, interesting stuff. So, like you're talking about before, you touch base a little bit on your ADHD. So in terms of your neurodivergence, what is your diagnosis? Because I know before we sort of caught up, you told me a little bit about your ADHD, how you got diagnosed, I think, recently, and you've also acquired some stuff as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. I think the acquired that we're talking about would be the initials of PTSD, a TBI, and so I acquired those officially in 2018. In 2019, I would get diagnosed with ADHD, and so that's where we kind of sit right now. And I've done a lot of work, kind of mental health advocacy, following kind of the examples of people like you, but also military leaders that are speaking up. The ADHD is what gave me hope. I couldn't understand those nasty acronyms of the other ones, right? But ADHD made sense. I can look back and understand how I could, be so, excellent in some areas, and then kind of it defined me from a young age.
Yeah, we talk a lot. We talk a lot about when we talk about initial diagnosis with people about it's that puzzle piece finally slotting into place and everything starting to make sense.
Yeah. And so it's relatively still a little bit new. I think in the beginning they were treating the PTSD and the TBI, and we've learned a lot. I think when initially, and a lot of us vets aren't proactive in seeking mental health. And so, I look great on paper, but there was in 2016, I had some mental health issues and got caught up in the alcohol for, a good stint, 11 months, what have you. And so I was getting treated for that. And I think even the way I was treated for that, it was wrong from an ADHD mind, right? They look at this, we got a combat vet, some alcohol abuse, let's give him this treatment. And it was almost like a flashback to, grade school and whatnot. And so it wasn't until a couple of years later that I took some things into my own hand. I got my own, got different therapists. And I think from almost hello, he was asking me if I had ADHD. And I said, I've got some other issues,
Yeah, crazy.
So finally I relented, I think. And when it got tested for the ADHD and it came back with flying colors, and I said that's really when some breakthroughs started happening on all fronts. And we're treating all three need treated different. They all kind of present the same if left untreated, but I've got a good team around me now of professionals.
Yeah, great. Because I think the biggest thing for myself, especially getting diagnosed, I was only diagnosed with my ADHD last year, and I, for a long time thought I was just dyslexic. But it just starts, and like Kev said before, with you start to have those puzzle pieces that start to connect together, and you're like, oh my God, that's why I get so frustrated when I'm at the shopping center and there's a big line, or I get frustrated doing this, or I'm struggling with depression now, or like you were talking about before, I can now see why I went down the track with substance abuse. Do you know what I mean? It's like you need to find that escape.
And I think we've got a good little sample group here because, it's quite a common thing we've talked about as well. People who were missed when we were younger because the diagnosis wasn't as good, getting diagnosed later in life. Because we're all recent ADHD diagnoses. So.
Because what was it like for you when you were younger, Carlos, especially being undiagnosed, school? Like, what was that all like for you?
Yeah, these are all, kind of relatively new reflections. And so as I look back, I could say, one of the things I'll credit my mother with is we didn't, there was no TV in the house growing up. And I don't want to say she made us read, but we loved reading from a young age. I was a voracious reader. And so, from an ADHD mind, it's a lot of discipline. And so there was a lot of discipline kind of growing up. I would test into, say, gifted and talented for reading, but I couldn't, pass a math test. So I knew I wasn't Harvard bound by 5th grade. And always high energy, staying, a bit rambunctious, sports and whatnot. And I will say, I knew by 5th grade that math wasn't going to be my strong point, but in 8th grade, there's probably only one teacher that stands out that I can name, and kind of Miss Holly Cross, and she was a math teacher, and I would get an A in her class. But every time I had her class, right in the middle of it, she'd tell me, get up and go get a drink of water. And so she saw it, and I think that little outlet right there, surprised me that I got an A in her class. And I don't say that I paid any more attention other than I'd take 15 minutes out of a 45-minute class and go figure it out.
But you know what? I reckon that you probably deserve that A. It's not like she just gave you an A because she wanted to give you an A. I think she probably knew how to get the best out of you, especially one telling you to go get a drink of water halfway through class. She knows that your mind is everywhere by then and you need a small break. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, that is it. And so from then on, probably it wasn't like, when forced to apply myself when it came to math, and, I would kind of spend most of my career in the engineering field, I could do it. But as I got older, it would be put this back against the wall, study like hell around the clock, act like it was nonchalant, not all that hard. And I think, kind of growing up, I can say right now, naturally, I'm an introvert, but I learned from a young age, a smile and a little bit of charisma can get me a second chance. And that's what I feel really got me through a lot of this, kind of life. So I always said what I lacked in intellect, I realized I can outwork a lot of people.
Have you read much yet in what you're learning about the masking side of things?
Yeah, it's kind of
scary. And how the sort of smiling and being charming works, but that can tire you out as well.
Yeah, I mean it's I could work a crowd. Yeah. Back in the day, and I still can now. I think when I'm motivated to, but I feel. And I went through something pretty traumatic, right? I mean, when I don't want to overgloss, and I want to kind of dwell here for a little bit. I was a high performer. When I got out, I had a nice kind of name brand corporate job, making, corporate money. And I had accomplished up to a master's degree level, was teaching as an adjunct professor. And, it almost happened overnight. I could say in retrospect, the red flags were there, but a glass of wine really went up to, we're having dinner, she's going to bed, and I'm polishing off another, the rest of the bottle and a couple of shooters, and that just progressed. It got out of hand. And
it's so easy to get into that pattern as well. Do you know what I mean? Because I think, and I've spoken about this with many people, with alcohol, for example, you can easily just go down to the shop and go buy some. You're not doing anything wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the military. It was, I don't want to say it was condoned, but it's part of the lifestyle, right? I mean, we worked hard and we partied hard. And also at that time, even when I got out of the military, I still really stayed in that environment for another 3 years. And then, I would kind of go cold turkey and move from the DC area out west and just kind of done with it. And I had been fortunate to grow up underneath the same mentors, same kind of shop, and not inside your typical military, maybe unit, if you will, didn't kind of wear uniforms that much and whatnot. And so I had a civilian boss that really piled the work on me. And I really grew underneath him, and was able to. I mean, that in itself it says a lot to how is my path. I was able to kind of create with good mentors that a good path forward. And so growing up in that, and as he and I would advance in levels of responsibility, I didn't realize how much perhaps some non-normal things have become normalized. And, growing up in an engineering unit, if you will, I didn't think I was, I could say that I'm just realizing there's a level of intellect that's maybe come through a lot of failure, that's why people took a shine to me. And really, kind of didn't give me anything, but allowed me to earn a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, awesome. Out of curiosity, now you've shared some really interesting stuff, but it'd be really interesting to just hear a little bit about your service. And I think this is coming from us as people who have never been in the army or the military. So it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to sort of hear like how. Do we go into that a little bit later, Kev? I think. Just in regards to your diagnosis. Well, you didn't know you were diagnosed when you first got into service, right? You didn't know you were ADHD.
Back then you weren't allowed to join if you had ADHD. And if we go back to kind of what kept me kind of going forward, I started boxing, at a young age. And so I was always really burning a lot of energy off all through my service. I was, get up early, run. I always my mind stayed busy, back then, frequent deployments, frequent travels. And to go back to kind of my service on that as well is I'm a data nerd, right? I mean, I've seen how technology changed war from the first time I would go in 2006 to Iraq. And then, in 2006 to Iraq. So I'm a comms guy. My job, my specialty was installing fiber optics, copper cables. And then as, kind of the war progressed, I was one of kind of a smaller group that, could install cell towers. And so as the war changed to where we were installing a lot of towers and antennas to collect signals, that was my specialty. And so I would get deployed a lot to support these small specialized teams and giving them some real-time communication access. So, if you look at it, you can say the military is about a decade ahead of industry when it comes to tech, and industry is about a decade ahead of government. So a lot of this stuff, AI and
you were dealing with it ages ago.
Yeah, it's. I think the military really pioneered a lot, and you could look at what I was going to say in 2006 when I went to Iraq. I was still waiting in line for 2 15-minute calls home a week, and you got to call a base, and the base patches you in, and you kind of get in through that way. By 2009, when I went back to Afghanistan, I think it was Skype was the big thing.
Yeah.
So now you got real-time feeds. So think about what that meant from a kind of a decentralized decision-making process. I would stand up, I would lead a team to stand up General McChrystal's 3-star command center, which was like the hub, if you think about it, that connected all of the Afghanistan theater and communications. So we would, kind of do some work on the fiber optics. And then, my specialty was maintaining real-time communications.
So you were the one who actually made all that happen, really?
Well, it was part of
part of what you did, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you I can install a tower under any type of pressure.
Wow, yeah. So I'm assuming, you're in a war zone. They're probably, and I would have assumed that your adrenaline would have been pumping pretty hardcore in some of those situations too, yeah?
And this may go to the ADHD mind too, right? So there's a lot of things that I could remember where, like, my first incoming mortar attack, adrenaline pumping, and then, say I've sat through, 500-600 of them. It had to become aware of them. And so, I was also a driver in 2009, so leaving the safety of the base, white knuckles. But then after that, it's more of I would get very calm and more in a zone type collected. My job wasn't being a trigger puller, right? I needed to make sure that calm stayed up. So I knew my role. So it's I would go back kind of 4 times. And so after the first time, when you go back, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say there was a healthy level of being afraid. And, when, some of these towers we would install would be on kind of the front lines. If you can think about it, you got your big base where the airplanes are flying in. War is war. Anybody who's been into a war theater is going to be impacted and think a little bit differently. But the further you go out from the sanctuary, the big bases, then you go into kind of forward operating bases, and they get smaller and smaller, and then you got camps and cobs, and they just get you're more out there by yourself. And it would be installing some of these towers on the front lines that I think seasoned me into a level of calm.
Also, too, I would have assumed that, by taking out one of those towers, that could be a big advantage to your enemy. So, in a way, you're a high potential target right there as well, right?
Yeah, there was one time I choppered in with a couple guys to install a tower. And, I would usually not wear kind of a uniform, so I would chopper in and give a piece of paper to somebody, and they tell me where to go. And and I had brought 2 young lads with me to do most of the work, but the morning after we touched down, they had were firing some mortars, and I think that some snipers had been poking around, if you will. So I wouldn't let them climb it. And so I installed that thing, kind of stick by stick, for the most part, myself, just because of, I think that's the military mindset. If somebody's going to go forward, it needs to be, kind of
the leader type, leadership type of stuff, right?
Yeah. So I think it was, they did their fair share of work, putting the things together, and, we call it working ground crew. But it was things like that. I remember, like, hey, this is gonna suck.
Yeah, man. Well, it's been
you gotta focus, right? You can't.
Yeah,
we say we were sniper snacks.
Yeah,
sniper snacks. Wow.
Yeah, like I just couldn't even imagine that, and it's just crazy. So, you've said a little bit about the service, but, and I suppose we're getting a little bit off track here, but I think it's really important. What is war like? Like, obviously you were talking about there's probably people, maybe mates of yours have been killed around you. How do you deal with that? That is a lot to take on. And then just be able to move forward and go, okay, I've still got a job to do and move forward. How does that work? What does that do to you?
Yeah, I saw when you put that question there. I've never been asked that before. And I could say also, going, back to my upbringing, and a lot of the books that I read were on history and kind of, war. So, war's not new. This was not going to be our last one. And so anybody who has been to war thinks about it a little bit differently, kind of after they've been there. And so I've had, I've seen some of the worst of what war does, from different, friends dying. Sergeant Christosimos would die in 2009, dear friend of mine. And I remember back then the day it happened, and he would die through by way of what we call VBIDs. The Taliban were putting bombs in taxis, and this was my first Afghan tour in 2009 in Kabul, and they were running them into the taxis. And so I remember the day it happened. It hurt, but I was driving out the next day kind of with my team. So I remember journaling, writing down, kind of raw thoughts, and saying, this is gonna mess me up at some point in my life, and then, kind of shouldering on. I think a couple months later in theater, I did break down, but then kind of buttoned it up and never really addressed it until, like I said, I went through some issues with kind of the alcohol abuse that had never presented before in my career. So why then? And that's where I say a lot of the analysis and looking inward. I didn't deal with it right. I'm still learning how to deal with it, and a lot of it is just talking about it. It's not kind of war. It's you have to talk about it, and that goes into, at least here in America, a bit of a culture clash. Of it's easy for veterans to feel that for 20 years, not a whole lot of people knew what was going on, and I'm vocal about it because I have to be.
Would it be correct? Sorry, you finish. Would it be correct that you kind of can't process it while you're still there? You kind of have to process it afterwards, or
I didn't know how. Right. Yeah. I wouldn't have my first mental health discussion, and I operated in the Intel community for most of my career, and kind of security clearance and everything that comes with that. I didn't have my first mental health discussion until I was probably 35, 36. By then it was retroactive. And, and I don't know what, in that lifestyle, I was squared away. And I excelled, but when it hit, and the transition period from military service, of being all in, always kind of ready to go, to not, I wish it's getting better now, but there wasn't a whole lot back then, and it was new, right? I mean, we've got to realize that this is unprecedented. America was at war for 20 years with an all-professional military. So you look at it's not just trauma, I would say, from the war, from PTSD from the war. It's you really got to take a hard look back at your life, and a lot of times it's easy to stop at the war and say I'm not going past that. And I think it's and that's why I say ADHD was a blessing in allowing me to. It's been 5 years, right? 2016 is when I put a pin in the map and saying it was a meltdown here, right? There was a moment where I didn't want to stick around, when I couldn't figure it out, when I wasn't effective, and there was no solution. There was a suicide attempt, and so that's why you see on LinkedIn, I'm very vocal there, because I'm not the only one. And for every veteran you see talking about it, there's scores in both America and Australia, UK, warrior's a warrior, I think that don't talk about it, for various reasons, whatever the reason, that doesn't matter. But, it was people that encouraged me to talk about it, and I'm just kind of paying it forward.
Yeah. I was just thinking about when you were talking there, like, also, too, it would you've obviously just I'm thinking about going on service, and sorry, I've got something coming through on my phone. Sorry. What is it like coming back? Because it would feel like you're coming back. You've just lived this whole huge experience. And then people are probably still the same, doing the same thing. Is that a weird experience as well?
So in retrospect, I remember coming back from the Afghan 2009 tour, which I would say, was probably my most horrific. And I came back, timing wasn't coordinated. And so you really, on your way back, kind of waiting around for a bird to catch you, back from Afghanistan to Uzbekistan to wherever back on home. It's a multi-day trip, and when you finally get home, you're tired. I remember flying into Baltimore, and that's where I was living. We called it the Freedom Bird. Taking the Freedom Bird back into Baltimore.
A bird's a plane, right?
That's a plane, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I get in, and it's late in the evening. I'm in my uniform. I got my duffel bag, and you kind of, just me, no dog, no nothing back then. And you kind of open that door and 9 months worth of silk built up, and you go to sleep, and and you go back to work, and it's kind of normal.
Wow.
And it's not, right? I think that was and different units, and like I said, I wasn't involved in your typical military unit, so I would kind of report back to my civilian led shop, and I didn't think anything was different back then. I was a hard charger, right? He was always, going to school or looking for, something to stay busy. Again, fighting two kind of wars at the same time. In 2009, I was getting ready to go back to 2010.
Crazy. I don't know if I've misread something, but was there something that you were in an accident or something while you were in service? Roadside bomb or something? Or have I read something completely different?
No. That was the signature one. So there was an incident where they ran one into the front gate of ISAF headquarters. And so that one was one where, it was a blast that kind of knocked me down. But you don't, when you see, what the destruction, the physical destruction that bomb did, versus, a non-visible. But that was one of the ones that we equated to TBI. And back then, and at that time.
Sorry, can I ask what, did you say TBI? Is it TBI?
Traumatic brain injury. So,
okay. Yeah.
So, and that's something that was the signature weapon of the wars, and so those things, you get jarred real quick, and your brain goes back, real, it rattles the brain, and a lot of studies are happening now, but it presents years later with the same emotional effects and maybe agitation and stuff as PTSD.
So are you referring to that as, say, like a lot of the head injuries, say that like football players or professional sports people are getting?
Yes. So football players, the only, I think, research that had been done on it prior to, I think, don't quote me on this isn't my level of expertise, but I think in 2006, 7, they really started saying, all right, this is, probably going to have some ramifications later on. I want to say it's probably not until the last decade that they've really been able to take a hard look at it and say, hey, and interestingly enough, I'm hearing that ADHD is manifesting from TBI's late stage.
I've actually heard, and I'm not confirming that, but I have heard something similar, because I've had people who have even had strokes and stuff like that who have had some form of ADHD has sort of come on, but I don't know. That's just secondhand information. I don't know if that's correct.
I think what's for me, the takeaway from my time in service and where I'm at now, and kind of what I've gone through, we all process it differently, is you got to be open, to understanding, that, when I was shocked when I was told I had PTSD, and I didn't wake up screaming. I didn't, there wasn't a lot of what we had maybe equated to it. And I think as a military mindset, there's always somebody that was downrange a little bit further than you. And so you never really label yourself with it until someone else is telling you have it. And you leave the VA with that little script of paper saying you got it, and you think, now what? It's kind of the scarlet letter. And even when I got it, I didn't really tell a whole lot of people. I didn't know what to do with it. What do you do with it? And so that's why I say is I went through and was checking all the boxes. I mean, if there's anything with an ADHD mind, I knew how to check boxes. And so I was going through all of that, but it was kind of an empty feeling. And so when ADHD, kind of that diagnosis came in, I said, if I put the work in, I could figure all this out. you know, that's why I said it's kind of sparked hope.
Yeah, no, that it's interesting how I suppose certain things that can happen in life can, you know, as weird as this sounds, can sometimes be for the best, if that makes sense. Sometimes we go through something really bad, but then you look at it and go, man, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be at this level now, or doing this, or whatever that is, if that makes sense.
I never thought anything in my service was bad, right? I mean, again, it's a mindset. We're a nation at war for 20 years, highly trained, kind of, you know, one-dimensional thinking. And if anything, the ADHD propelled me. I mean, it allowed me to, you know, lack inhibitions, you know, not really regard risk, consequences. And I can look back and say it allowed me to take things in differently from a nonlinear perspective. It allowed me to, I didn't know what depression was back then. I knew what anxiety was, but it kept me sharp. And so when I transitioned out and I didn't have an outlet for the anxiety, and, you know, you know, you're drinking a little bit more. So guess what I'm not doing? I'm not running in the morning, you know, and so it's where I was, you know, I didn't know alcohol and depression were kind of twisted cousins. And so I really learned a lot off of mental health and you know, I can say relative to what it used to be, anxiety is not a problem for me.
I suppose it would a little bit be the conversation as well, because I remember seeing on TV shows even as late as the you know, sort of early 2000s, people debating on panels and stuff whether or not depression existed. I think we've made leaps and bounds, and, you know, since I think around your time in the service to now.
Yeah, I mean, I had to accept. So I can say right now in my life, anxiety is not impacting me, but, you know, I've had to accept, you know, and identify what depression is, and, you know, and that's where a lot of, you know, taking the time to work through this, and you know, for many of us, it's who wants to sit there and talk about depression and how it impacts our life, especially when, you know, it's kind of counterproductive to what you had been doing, or maybe not, you know, in alignment. But by accepting it, understanding that it's there, and really going back to the basics, sleep, diet, you know, kind of surrounding yourself with good people, you know, it'll pass. It was in that moment where I didn't know what it was. I remember Googling, you know, this feeling I was going through, and I didn't have social media or any of that jazz. And coming across TEDx, and I didn't know what TEDx was. And there was a couple of one of them was an Australian mate, a guy named Ash Judd. And another one was an American Marine, Thomas Burke, and they were talking about their time. Well, Thomas Burke, in his thing, I think, was PTSD and returning to the classroom or something like that. He was describing, you know, the kind of the same time frame I was in Afghanistan, and then as he got out, you know, some of the motions of, you know, just coping with alcohol and copious amounts of drugs, and, you know, and how his suicide attempt, and, you know, I was like, wow. That was the first moment I realized all of this stuff I was trying to keep hidden was alone. And I think the difference, I saw the visible difference was he was on a TEDx show talking about how he had just graduated from Yale. And I thought, what am I missing here? And so I remember watching, you know, him over and over and over. And then that led me down kind of the spiral trail. And there was another Australian guy who, you know, Ash Judd, you know, who was describing again these similar emotions. It's nothing, you know, once you start really pulling it back, you know, war is war, it's horrible. But what it does to the human mind, it's you know, kind of a same lane, and how until you take the time to own it and address it and deal with it, you're not going to get past it. And so you're not going to be just as easily, you know, kind of hid from it, and I probably could have maintained. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm just glad that, and it took a lot longer than I thought. Like anything else, I failed at it and got it wrong until I got it right. But I also not, these days, not holding regret. I could look back and say there were some mistakes made, and how treating a mind with ADHD or PTSD, that same cookie cutter situation or scenario, it's you gotta treat them differently. And so, like I said, it was that therapist who I probably cycled through a number of them before I got the one that really made some strides and impact on stuff with them in my life. I mean, he called it from the get-go, day one almost.
Yeah, that's unreal. And I suppose you could probably see a lot of things and just connect the dots. But sorry, I just wanted to sort of go on something that you did mention just before we jumped on. Now, back when you were in service, there was really no support for neurodiversity in the special forces. Sorry, mate.
I
had a full blank there. Yeah. Because I was gonna say army, but I'm like, no. I'll just.
So I don't know, right? I mean, I'm just now finding about neurodiversity within the last 3-4 years, and so but in retrospect of the work I have done, no, it wasn't. There was no programs. There was no neurodiversity. There was no. I don't think you could get into it. I think then it kind of lessened up to where you can get into it if you had a waiver to where you weren't on meds for 6 months. Well, that? Right.
But out of curiosity, sorry to butt in. Let's say if you go back to that time when you were in service, do you look at some things now and go, oh my God, that was why, what was some of those challenges that you faced that you didn't really think about at the time? You knew you were challenging with some things, but now you've been diagnosed. What was some of them when you were back in the service? Oh, really?
From I would go through electronics school, and it was one of those things. Military school is a whole lot different than what I would say most people are used to, and so you get you fail out. So there's different blocks, and they're really cramming all of this electronics, hardcore, kind of heavy stuff, into a compressed schedule where you're also learning to become a military member. And so it's everything structured and rigorous in the class, and you're on time, you're sitting in a certain posture and all of that. And you were allowed one time to kind of fail a class, I believe. And then if you failed it again, you would get washed out. And pretty much if you failed at one, you were just biding your time till they were going to find a way to get you out. And so I failed a block early on with my electronics class. I think that was a 5-month course or something like that. And so I failed it early on. And so for the rest of my time in that electronics school, my back was against the wall and just studying around the clock. And so as I look at it, memorization for an ADHD mind's a little bit different, so, and that same type of mindset would continue on. And as I progressed, I tried to mask how hard I thought I was working. I said, this can't be normal, and so I wouldn't go out on a Friday night. I mean, it would be from, I'd be studying or trying to figure it out. And
you almost be burning yourself out just from studying and that.
Yeah, back then, and I can get away with, a couple hours of sleep. So insomnia was something that I had to address also. And, that all caught up. And so, the whole mindset of all I'll work you, first in, last out, kind of send me. I know that I use that to mask a lot of, where maybe, other people would say I would fall short, but, you come over the top on some other things. It's really, could hide some deficiencies.
Yeah, interesting. We are getting towards the end, but we just have a few more questions to go through. But what are some of the positives and I know you've shared some of these, but what are some of the positives you've taken out of your whole experience, especially with your diagnosis? Maybe now, I think a big thing is your what you've shared so far is you're quite open about this now, where you said you just didn't know how to talk about a lot of this stuff. Now you're very open and helping other people, I suppose, be able to feel comfortable in themselves as well. So what was your experience?
I think ADHD allowed me to develop empathy. I can see other people that were struggling, and maybe they weren't as, masked extrovert and didn't have maybe the charisma and whatnot. And so there's people that I could connect with, as I look back. I could say the discipline and the leadership instilled resiliency. The one time I tried to quit, I didn't. And so once I made that commitment to figure it out, and it wasn't easy, right? Sitting here talking about it, it's I've been talking about it for a couple of years now because I had to. When I committed to figuring it out, it was extremely difficult, and I didn't know what I was figuring out. And so it was just and when I left kind of the service, I was done. I never thought that I would take up championing, veteran causes, mental health, as part of, the career projection that I had, forecasted for myself, but I had to. And so it's, that is, I think for veterans, the number one thing is you got to connect. And if you don't, suicide is rampant in this veteran community, and it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. So that's why I say that, like so many of us, I'm just following in kind of the paths of what other veterans are doing, and they're probably doing it for similar reasons as me. They have to.
It feels like you haven't just taken positives out of this; you're actually contributing positives back into the situation.
Yeah, and I think it's. I wasn't expecting that when that went down in 2016. I didn't see that one coming. That hit me, and there was, it's people near and dear to me that were impacted by it, and it's understanding it. Why did it happen? And there's a commitment that I owe to people that believed in me, and myself, I think too, right? There's no one, once those parameters and those barriers and that discipline was lifted, I went all Charlie Sheen pretty quick.
Can I say, or ask, I should say, in the United States, is the government putting a lot of money into, say, veteran mental health, or is there anything, or are you finding it's a real uphill battle? What's it like? What's your experience been?
I would say, the government's put a lot of money in it, and veterans don't need another dollar thrown at us from my perspective when it comes to
okay, so they're doing a really good job.
We need acceptance by our community, right? We need understanding, and we need people to get past thank you for your service, right? They need to understand what happened out there, and they need to understand if they want to ask these young men and women of this nation to go back to war. It's when I say I would go back again if pressed. You really have to press me because I feel a lot of our, it's not malicious, but the lack of understanding, the lack of acceptance for a lot of veterans is baffling.
You were saying before the podcast when we were chatting that there's a neurodiversity program now.
Yeah, I was super happy to see that.
In the military.
There was a major from that chimed in on that, and I did a quick looky-loo and found out that that major's leading up a neurodiversity initiative. So I haven't had much time to drill down on it, But
I don't know if I've ever spoken to a major before.
Well, he wants to talk to you. And,
yeah, I'm all ears.
I almost feel like, my work is done. The cavalry's here, and
it's about networking. It's about connecting, right? That's what you're talking about before, right?
It's that's going to change so many lives, kind of for the better. And I think if kind of you harness that ADHD mind, you harness that neuro mind, and the biggest thing for me was not making excuses. Kind of owning that your mistakes, and you're going to make them, and then you're going to have that ADHD mind. But there's such a misunderstanding of what it is and how it impacts. So neurodiversity in business, right? There's so many initiatives out there, and this is one of the positive things of social media, digital platforms. I feel like the neurodiverse community globally has united, and it's people like you on this platform, giving kind of power of voice to people like me. I mean, I couldn't do what you do, and I can come in here and kind of share my story. And a lot of these questions that you put forward, for me, they're the first time I've been forced to consider them, let alone openly.
Well, I hope we haven't forced you to do anything.
That's I think the growth, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think as well, for us especially, Kevin, we were sort of before and that's why I reached out to you to say, hey, look, what questions do you want? Because I suppose there was a few questions where we're sort of like, man, it'd be cool to learn a little bit about this side of what you've experienced, because people like myself and Kevin, we just haven't lived that lifestyle before, and it is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, if there's a takeaway that can come here out of this, and Australia and kind of America have been allies for a long time, is war is war, right? Throughout history, and it's going to impact. And so you meet a veteran, get to know him. And realize that, you eat a hamburger with them, he's probably going to have different thoughts than you. And I think it's they want to be productive in society. We want to be productive in society. But it's PTSD. There's the stigma of, kind of we're homeless, and, just there's a stigma that needs to change, right? And so how I act and coming out here and talking about it, and I'm learning, right? And I failed, and I'm open with kind of my, we'll call them my learning curves. And what I've always had, though, is people around me that I can open up to, and mentors. And for the first time, I've had to turn some of those mentors into kind of mini therapists. There's one of the groups that I work with and support is it's called Frost Call, and you know what that is? That's a video gaming group of veterans.
Okay.
They get together to play video games, right? But guess what? They're talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so
it's funny because I just brought like the new PS5 because I needed. Because for me, especially being in business and all that type of stuff, sometimes I just have so much going on in my mind that I got the PS5 just so I can get away and potentially connect with new people who I've never really spoken to before.
So I got all wrapped up. I remember one of those software computer games on like Rome, Total War or whatever, right? And it consumed me. And I played that thing around the clock. And so I kind of I know my vices, and I know when to step away. And so I never really picked up a video game.
Yeah, there's probably too much of a good thing too.
But then my therapist is telling me, hey, you need to, not think about work. You need to think, you need to think about, maybe, what do you think about video gaming? And I said, I don't know, doc. And so what I did was I had somebody I met, I was introduced to somebody who was looking for, the founder of this company, a guy named Dr. Wesley, and he's a veteran who started this, and he was looking for board members. And so I said, you know what, I'll join the board. And so, now I'm an advisor to the board.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
So that's what I say, is I can really, I'm the type of guy that, I think a lot of ADHD mindsets, you got to put those parameters and controls around yourself and have other people hold you accountable, or, I'm not playing, Fortnite or whatever for 24/7.
Yeah, totally.
You can go. So I've actually recently had the pleasure of getting to know a veteran who served in Afghanistan, involved in liberating some fairly major areas around there.
Is that an Australian veteran?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I met him at a show. He came to see the band, and we just started talking. And I really encouraged him to get back into music because he's at my age, which isn't a spring chicken, but it was clear he needed to express himself somehow. And some of the things, just getting to know him, some of the things he told me that he's done as part of his service was just mind blowing to me. It's like, that's a life experience I'm never gonna fully grasp. But yeah, and then he started a band, and the band's going really well, and he's a really great singer. He had a bit of stuff he needed to get out, so it came out well artistically.
Oh, so good in his lyrics and that, yeah.
Yeah. So, but just the focus for him and that outlet has really helped him a lot.
That's exactly what's needed, right? And I think, like I said, I came to you guys, and I kind of watched you guys, and there's a lot of podcasts out there, and going on podcasts is not my thing. But I really watched how you treated your guests and kind of how you guys were genuine and just truly seeking yourselves, right? And then you guys, took leadership and took the platform. And so I think, a lot of veterans, they, mental health, you've been through some ADHD, you've got some, some things you're going through. It's really the arts that I think that really allow you to, for me, it's I appreciate them a little bit differently, but I like going to the symphony or kind of it's really the arts and those minds which you guys represent of the non-judgmental type. There's a lot to judge on a veteran, but I think it's just that, taking them in and asking some questions, and the genuine curiosity it helps kind of the veteran as much as it helps you guys. And I think that's what we need to know. And at least here in America, we should not go to war again for another 20 years if the society doesn't know what's going on.
Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's where can I impact, right? So I think it's right here doing this, and I don't need to. I'm not going to have to do this for the rest of my life, but for right now it works. I think for me as much as it does for the people that maybe listen to me. And so that's all I try and promote, because I know it works, is talking. Find somebody.
Totally. And I think it's probably already opening doors for you, and I'm sure there's probably going to be other things that start to pop up, and so I can definitely see you going into some other really cool stuff. But I tell you what, we're getting towards the end here. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a completely different topic to what we've ever spoken to about before. So thank you so much for reaching out to us and coming on. To be totally honest, I didn't know what to expect. So I've really enjoyed myself here. It's really opened me up to a whole different world and experience I've never lived before. But, if people want to connect with you or check out more of what you're doing, where's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn, right? I'm still getting used to this social media thing. So find me on LinkedIn. And I started a company, actually, to keep it short, but it's a data company. And, I really want to be a beacon of light to the neurodiverse community, right? You come to us and you're neurotypical, you're going to feel a little weird.
Yeah, crazy.
It's not that bad, but I think, it's neurodiversity really is a global issue, and you've got to break it down and really, I think technology is going to allow us to, kind of band together and really do some excellent things. If as kind of leading in with Hand Up, I went through some stuff. And if I don't watch out, I don't have people around me watching out for me, there's a high probability I'll go back through it. And so I want to thank you guys for giving me the courage to come on here and talk about things that I've never talked about before.
Not a problem. No, thank you. If we have contributed in any way, thank you so much. But really, and I always say this, it's the people who we connect with, so people like yourself, who bring the best out of us that helps other people. So no, thank you. We really appreciate it. Photon John, did you have anything else you wanted to say, mate?
Just a huge thank you, Carlos. This has been great. And if we have had an impact, that makes me feel great, because that's what we're trying to do here. But I'm really enjoying, because this is such a different conversation, really shining a light on the fact that neurodiversity is everywhere. people from all walks of life, and just opening up the conversation. That's all we want to do. So this is a special one. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and sort of going on from that, it is amazing how, like, you've reached out to us and how many other people we have coming to us with all these different neurodiversity experiences. And it's sort of like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. So no, thank you so much for coming.
It's been a pleasure. And it's hope, right? It's people like you that make it fun, make it enjoyable, and make it thought-provoking. And instigate change. And so I'm going to fall back and you're going to be probably doing this again next week. And I think that is it, is keep kind of leading the charge and going forward.
We definitely are doing it next week on Monday, to be precise, at 5:30 Eastern Australian time for anyone who's listening right now. But Carlos, you were the man. Thank you so much for listening. Not listening, but for coming on and sharing your story with us. For anyone listening, thank you very much for listening. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow all of our social media platforms and check us out on the OpenHeartedSociety.com. My name's Will Wheeler with my co-host, Photon John, and this is the Open Hearted Podcast. Till next time.